think we're going to get started, and I'd like to welcome everybody who's here to the fourth and final of this fall series of webinars about the death penalty being produced by Death Penalty Focus. I'm Maddie DeLone, and I'm the Interim Executive Director of Death Penalty Focus, a California-based organization that's committed to abolishing the death penalty in California and other parts of the country and in the world since 1988. If you want more information about Death Penalty Focus, please go to our website, deathpenaltyfocus.org. We'll also send you some materials after this webinar, and you can learn more about us and figure out how you can get involved. I'm deeply honored to be here with all of you today who've tuned in, and thank you for taking the time to be with us for this program, The Death Penalty Brutalizes Us All. Special thanks to our co-sponsors whose names are on the screen that have helped spread the word about this webinar and do amazing work in this and related fields. We thank them, and you can see them on the screen now, and they'll also be in the materials that we send you after the webinar. Before we begin, I just want to go over a few technical instructions. Most of you know how to use Zoom by now, but for the purpose of this session, we'd ask you to use the Q&A function, usually found at the bottom, although sometimes the side of your screen. You can send us concerns about technical issues, but more important, we hope that you'll send us questions that you may have for the panelists. We'll try to get to as many of your questions as we can. We will be together for about an hour, and we'll try to wrap up on time to let you get to your next meeting or appointment or activity when you're expecting to. And now, without further ado, I will turn the program over to Mike Farrell. DPF is fortunate to have Mike as our board president and as a longtime board member, and to have him moderating this important discussion today. I'll turn it over to Mike, who will introduce the conversation and the other speakers.
Thanks very much, Maddie. And hello to you all. Thank you for being with us. I am Mike Farrell. I'm president of Death Penalty Focus, the board of Death Penalty Focus. And I want to thank you for joining us for our fourth and final webinar of 2021, The Death Penalty Brutalizes Us All. I think most people who look at the death penalty seriously understand that that it is racist in application, that it only is used against the poor and the poorly defended, that it entraps and kills the innocent as well as the guilty, and that it is hideously expensive, each of which, all four of them are reasons for doing away with it, but people have accepted it. One of the things people don't fully understand, and I think we want to examine today, is about the fact that the death penalty does brutalize us all. Jeffrey Rush, who was one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, a quite extraordinary man, was an opponent of slavery, and he was a medical doctor who wrote the first, I guess, psychological textbook in the United States. He said that the death penalty, he started actually the Pennsylvania Prison Project. And in working in that area, he said the death penalty brutalizes everyone. And I think it's clear to understand, and I think we all need to understand, it not only brutalizes that person it's murdering, but it brutalizes the people doing the killing, the murdering. It also brutalizes those who are litigating these things. And in a kind of ever widening circle, it includes the community, and it includes all of us. Here in the United States of America, silence gives consent. So if we are silent about this process that's going on, we're consenting to it, and there is harm being done. So we want to talk about that today. But before I introduce you to our three panelists, I'd like to acknowledge our co-sponsors to this event, beyond the ones Maddie told you about, and thank the members of Amnesty International Group 137 and the International Museum of Human Rights, both in San Diego, California, for observing Human Rights Day by attending the webinar. This is a day they traditionally honor an old friend, Tim Spann, who before his death in 2018 channeled his lifelong commitment to criminal and social justice by working with the death penalty focus, with murder victims' families for reconciliation, the Journey of Hope, and Amnesty International's San Diego chapter. A 30-year plus involvement that included a long stint as the group coordinator. Now I want to introduce our three panelists who, as I indicated, I hope, come from very different walks of life, but have their own experience with and of the death penalty. And they can talk each for a moment about how it has impacted them. LaWanda Lewin's Private is Lyons Private, Pruitt, sorry, is a member of the DPF Board of Directors. Forgive me, Rwanda, for following up your name. Serving as vice chair of our outreach committee. LaWanda is a former chief investigator in the Santa Barbara County Public Defender's Office. She was the first African-American woman to achieve the title of chief investigator, a position she held from 1995 until she retired in 2016. As chief investigator, LaWanda assisted in the defense of several death penalty cases, an experience that cemented her opposition to the death penalty. Second is Donna Larsen. She's a retired allied health professional and paralegal. She has spent the last 26 years trying to prove that her son, Keith Doolin, who is on death row in San Quentin, was wrongly convicted of the murder of 2 women and the shooting of 4 others in Fresno, California, between November 1994 and September 1995. She is a leader of the Death Row Working Group, which supports people on death row and those sentenced to life without parole, and their families and friends on the outside. And third panelist is a particular treat for me. Joe Ingle is a United Church of Christ minister. Joe is one of my mentors in this. I was doing a television series about 4 decades ago, and Joe contacted me and said, asked if I was against the death penalty, and I said I was, and he said, I need help. He was leading at that point the Southern Coalition on Jails and Prisons. He is a minister working with people in prison since the early 1970s, when he was a student at Union Theological Seminary and living in East Harlem. Native of North Carolina, Joe has been a spiritual advisor to people on death row throughout the South for 50 years, and the last 30 of them primarily on Tennessee's death row. So let me just begin then and ask LaWanda to just say a few words, if you will, give us some thoughts on this question of the dehumanization process that is involved with this so-called penalty, the death penalty.
Well, Mike, excuse me, I was almost just going to go right into the question. First of all, thank you for the nice introduction. Thank you, Death Penalty Focus, for the invitation. I am really honored to be amongst you, Mike, Joe, and Donna, such an esteemed panel. Now, as far as the dehumanizing, first of all, anytime a person, the death penalty is filed on a person, an individual who was once a baby, then a first grader, second grader, we could even say kindergartner, all the way through high school, possibly. That in itself, to file for the death penalty, is dehumanizing in itself, that you would take that on to execute another person. So what the defense and the legal team has to do is to humanize the person, because they've been dehumanized with the charges. And so you have to humanize them so that when they get before the jury and the people in the courtroom, they will have the same feeling that that the team has for the person. For instance, like you know, there are two phases: the penalty and the guilt. And in the process, the team, depending upon who you have, mitigation specialists, investigators, and so forth, you're gathering records, and you're gathering records all the way back from the point, prenatal records before the person was born, you know, and then you get the baby pictures, and you get the kindergarten, first grade pictures, and so on. So you have all that. You also learn the family name for the person, you know, and so then you of course, you're going to call the person by the family name. At least we did. Whatever, you know, Bill, Mike, whatever. Then that was the name that we used to refer to the person, and you really, really get to know the person.
Yeah, I'm sure, and the impact of getting to know that person who's been dehumanized by the system must have a tremendously difficult thing for you as a person outside that circumstance to deal with.
It does, Mike, and you want to do everything you can to save that person's life. You don't want that stain in your psyche, and you don't want to have to deal with that. And so what you do, and the team do everything possible to save that person's life, meaning a lot of long hours. It's all encompassing, and you put your life on hold. It's a 2 to 3 year process before it goes to trial. And so you put your life on hold. For me, my daughter was away in college on at least a couple of the cases that I was involved in. And then, you know, she was all grown up then. So I just had the 3 adults to come home to. Well, you know, adults, they need care also, and they're part of your family. So, you know, you have to have some respite time where, you know, you can at least come and let the adults out, maybe take them for a little walk, feed them, whatever, before you get back to work. But I would say indeed that you put your life on hold.
You do indeed. You do indeed. Thank you, Luana. Donna, you have, I don't need to ask, you have a son on death row.
Yes.
You have dedicated your life to trying to deal with that. Talk about the price of that, please.
Well, I call it the brutalization of death row, and the injustice of the legal system. And first, I want to thank you, Mike, for having us as a panel today, and to the DPF staff for presenting an important part of living with the death penalty and someone on death row, how it brutalizes and makes our families inhumane. The death sentence and sentence of death, a life without the possibility of parole, is a second death sentence, and it brutalizes everyone. Even those that don't realize it, it's brutalizing them in some way. They have to pick up a paper sometimes and read it. They look at TV for the news and it's there. They don't understand that it's really brutalizing them in many different ways. And to brutalize, it means to be unfeeling or inhumane. And the brutalization or inhumane act of the death penalty for families and loved ones who have loved ones on death row doesn't stop with the immediate family. It expands to the extended family and friends, and it changes who you are in an instant. Financial, emotional, health, poverty, and disease is created with this. If we may equate this brutalization to the experience of war, and we can call it legal judicial system war, is as being captured and have claims of being brutalized, that's what happens. The financial cost of this brutalization comes in many forms, as losing your job, being ousted of your former society, losing favor with your religious community, unable to shop during normal business hours as you are recognized and pointed out. And if I may, I'll just share a little story with you. It was during trial. My face and Keith's face was on every news media in Fresno area during that time. And it was lunchtime on a Friday with a long line going out the bank that I was about to go into. And as we're standing there in line, a lady saw my face on the TV there in the bank, and she turned around, pointed her finger and says, "There's the mother of that murderer." And everybody, like a domino effect, turn. So I just turned around and looked too. I wasn't going to give in to it. Mm-hmm. Of course, people knew who I was because it was very obvious, but I did that. I think it was to save myself first. And also the thought came over me, what about family members of the victims? It was another reminder for them, and I didn't know what would happen. So that was my reaction to that. Just boom, 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 turn around, and I'm gone. I did make my bank purchase that I had to do at that time. And with all of that being said as the financial cost, it just never stops. You think you might have some money in the bank when you start a trial, and then you go through the appeals and you no longer have any money in the bank. And that goes for every family on death row in the state of California. You have the emotional brutalization for families and they're impacted in many different ways. Your so-called friends turn their backs on you, your family, calls and communication stop. One usually makes new friends and tries to create a new extended family, but always with the issue of trust, because you know that you have someone on death row and you can't trust everybody when that happens. And like many times I introduce myself as Donna Larsen, or sometimes Donna Doolin Larsen, because that's my real name. And I see people picking up their phones and going to Google Donna Doolin Larsen. There I am. So be it. I can't trust that. And that's sad. I didn't have that issue before. The judge, the district attorney, Dennis Cooper, they thought they would keep me quiet by calling me the mother from hell. Little did they know, I'm still talking and I'm still haven't shut up yet. And I wear that label with pride because they just really thought they were going to get to me and brutalize me that much more. And I said, no way, you're not doing that. And knowing your loved one is innocent, and that has been proven by exculpatory evidence and DNA, and attorney David Mugridge, who came forward and said that he had actually been the trial attorney for the real perpetrator. And that makes the cost of the death penalty unforgivable, and it continues to brutalize everyone. I also think that the victims' families of who are brutalized, thankfully, they have many resources that those families can engage in. Then comes the health factor of the family, extended family and friends. High blood pressure, diabetes out of control, stroke, mental health, and death. This too ties into the emotional part of being brutalized. Holidays and birthdays are sad. One tries to keep it upbeat. Sometimes it's hard. Myself, the brutalization of Keith's case, I feel like I've been beaten to a pulp on the inside. From the outside, no one would know that there are open scars oozing from the legal system beatings that have not healed. One has a lot of hurt and emotional pain from being brutalized by the injustice of the death penalty. I pick myself up every day and wade through the thick mud of the brutalization, knowing I am working every day to make a difference for those on death row and their families. Then I think, as bad as the brutalization is on the outside of the prison walls, what about those, including staff, on the inside walls of the prison? This is a ripple effect to all this. We must end the death penalty in LWOP now. Thank you.
Donna, I'm obviously deeply moved by your situation, but I also want to add something about the fact that the district attorney in this case could call you, a mother in pain because of what he believes or wants to claim that your son did, the mother from hell. How dehumanizing is that to him? to have stooped to that kind of level?
Well, at that particular moment, I don't think it was dehumanizing to him. I had to turn it around and make a positive out of it. I just wasn't going to let he or the judge, because it is in the documents, it is in transcript, that I was called the mother from hell, and I was alluded to as the mother from hell. And so I guess it tells you a lot about him as a person, that he couldn't bring himself up out of that thinking to call me by name. And, you know, that's it.
But my point is, here is this system, and what it is doing to people on both sides of these issues is brutalizing to the point that somebody could stoop to that level. Thank you, Donna, for who you are and what you're doing.
Thank you.
Joe, my friend, you've put yourself in the position of offering solace to the people on death row, the people you care about, the people you serve across the South through the death penalty system. I know of many of the cases you've been involved in, but can you talk just a little bit about what the price of that is for you and for those people who you share this time with? Joe, I have a feeling you're not you're muted.
Unmute. How's that?
Okay, there's good.
I'd like to thank you and your colleagues at Death Penalty Focus for really what is a timely discussion. And as I thought about this, I'm aware of my own failings. And one of the failings is, I think, with our language. The death penalty is so sanitized in our country, from calling it the death penalty to an execution, that we have pulled the fangs out of the horror of it. And the horror of it is horrific. So I'm going to try to alter my language in the course of our webinar to call the death penalty public murder, which it is, so that you understand everyone who participates in the murder of this person, this murder okayed by law, is engaging in acts of trauma-inducing pain at whatever level you happen to be involved in. There is no one who is not feeling the corrosive effect of this process. No one. And that's certainly true of me and anyone else who's in there trying to oppose this horror. So none of us are pure in this. We're all contaminated. We're all traumatized. And I think that's what Donna and LaWanda are really touching on. And it's the process itself that does that. And part of the insidious nature of this is that it's done in a way that is societally approved and sanctioned. So that means the opprobrium is on you if you're opposing it. It's your problem. It's your issue. It's not our problem because it's the law. And I see that when I work with victims' families. I see that when I work with people who are facing trial for, murder, and I see it with people on death row, and I see it with wardens and executioners. Everyone is enwrapped, folded, if you will, in the saran wrap of state killing. And we're all mashed together. We're up against each other. I recall in particular, as I think about how intimate this horror is, when John Spinkelink was electrocuted by the state of Florida on May 25th, 1979. I was with his mother in the hotel room. And after, who just fell sound asleep from exhaustion. So I was the one who had to tell her that her son had been killed. So after we went through that, the family came together, we grieved, we remembered John, and we decided we'd go to a restaurant because we'd all been so involved and running around like crazy trying to stop this execution. We hadn't eaten for, almost 48 hours. So we went to a local restaurant in Stark, Florida. And we're sitting there, the Spinkelink family, myself, and John's lawyers. And we're in this little steak restaurant in Stark, Florida. And I look out, and here comes David Brierton, the warden, who had just presided over John Spinkelink's electrocution, toward the restaurant to come have lunch. And I was just so stunned, I didn't know what to say. And fortunately, Tom Feimster, who was an Episcopal priest, also showed up. And Tom and I were John's spiritual advisors. And so he intercepted Warden Brierton and told him that the Spinkelink family was in there, and he turned around and left. But in that instant, in that moment of time, Carol Myers, John's sister, had jumped up from the table and left. And I turned around after Brierton had driven off, and I looked at Tim, her husband, and I said, "Where's Carol?" He said, "She's in the bathroom throwing up." Mm. That's how intimate this is. The man who had presided over her brother's killing was coming in the restaurant to have lunch. And it turned her inside out. She just had to puke her guts out. So that's what we're talking about here. And I think that's what you have to understand, that we're all caught up in this process.
You've said it, Joe. I want to ask you to touch on one more thing. You corrected me. We were on a panel together, and we were talking to a group of district attorneys and about this whole issue. And I talked about the fact that most of the people who come up today to be executed are what I called volunteers, people who have given up their appeals because they couldn't stand it anymore, because whatever. They simply were giving up their appeals and had volunteered. The point we were making by calling them volunteers is that there were still appeals to be had. They could still drag the case out and hopefully get a change of circumstance. And you corrected me, properly so, and I'll never forget it, because you said there are no volunteers, implying clearly that the system is so overwhelming that one makes no voluntary choice when one is in that situation. Can you help me with that a little bit?
Sure. So let's make it personal. Let's say you're the person on death row. What does that mean? That means you're in a cage. You're in a cage basically 23, 24 hours a day. You may get out of this cage 3 times a week to exercise for an hour if you're fortunate. But you're basically locked up in a cage. And you've been told how we're going to kill you. Mike Farrell, we're going to lethally inject you with these drugs, and we're going to exterminate you. Very clear. And you cannot imagine a more coercive situation. This is what they've done to you. They put you in a cage. They've told you how they're going to kill you. And they're now in the process of going through the legal hoops to do that very thing. So in that kind of incredible emotional pressure, there is no free will. There is no, quote, volunteering going on. You're on a conveyor belt to extermination. That's what you're on. And for you to say, I can't stand this, I can't do it anymore, it's killing me, I just want to die, that is not volunteering. It's the ultimate of coercion. And that's what we're talking about. This process is ultimately coercive on everyone involved.
Indeed. Luanda, you mentioned having to get to know the people you were involved with defending, and the price that was exacted from you by the fact that you had you had to then realize that in some cases those people were going to die. I don't know if any of your charges were executed, but they were headed in that direction, as Joe's just indicated, on the conveyor belt. And I've often wondered what it does to those, and I know what it does. I know so many of them, but the defenders, whether they're the investigators or the mitigators or the lawyers who are pleading in court on behalf of these people, what is that? What goes on in that world when you suffer a loss?
Well, thank you, Mike. Lucky for fortunate, I'll say, for me, no one has been executed. We have several clients on death row. I was with the office for 33 years. And it's about 50-50, 50% got LWOP, and 50% on death row. And I can tell you that the one thing that I've always prayed and thought of before Governor Newsom put the moratorium in place, I prayed that no one would be executed, that they would just die. They would just die a natural death before they got to that point of actually having to be lethally injected, or the electric chair, or whatever they would use, because of course they don't, if they don't make the poison that they need to execute them. I suppose that I have heard talk about using the electric chair again, or shooting firing squad. So for me, I haven't had that happen, but I did worry before that moratorium that it could happen. And there's one client in his 70s. He was an old heroin addict. And, it was just always my prayer that before it reached that point, and he's the longest serving client that I had contact with. And as a matter of fact, I got to know him so well, and he got to know me so well that he called me comadre. And I actually arranged for him to marry his childhood girlfriend. And I guess I was the best woman, you would say, for the marriage. But I prayed, and then there's another client on death row, and he was actually in his 20s. He has he had a young son, and I know the realization hit him one day that, if he's executed, what happens to his son? So it's not just affecting him, but there is a child that's involved. And that child, that child would definitely be traumatized if his dad is executed. The same as the parents and the siblings. On another case I had, and Donna touched upon that, where you're kind of shunned. And what happened, and I apologize for the dog barking, it's that dog that I didn't spend time on.
That's okay.
Anyway, Donna touched upon that and how you're shunned. I know this family, middle class family, and they worked in government jobs, and they loved their brother dearly, but was really embarrassed by the prospect that he was facing the death penalty. And it was just like almost too much for them to bear. As for me, when you have to humanize a client, and I didn't have to humanize them, but that's just what happens. You have that contact. I had one client, it was every day. Every day he had to speak to me. And I was in the office usually on the weekends also. And he knew that I was there, and he would call until he could get me. I was told by a psychologist friend that he had transferred like my mothering instincts from his mother over to me. But anyway, one day I wasn't in the office. I mean, we had days where we had long hours where we would leave at 2 o'clock and travel to see experts and so forth. Anyway, he couldn't get me, and he was in a panic, and he was just calling all around and, you know, about to just have that emotional break. So I got to the point where I had to let him know, you know, kind of give him a schedule on, okay, you can call me because this day I'm going to be here and so forth.
Yeah.
I hope I answered your question. I kind of went on a little bit.
No, it's absolutely that. Bless you for being there and being willing to be there for those people. Donna, two things I want to just ask you to speak about a bit. You mentioned the ripple effect. Can you expand on that a little bit? And I'm wondering if it affected. I'm wondering if it affected that woman who saw your face on television and chose to point you out in that bank. If this thing is so pervasively poisonous that it is doing what I believe it is doing, and when I say that it is taking us to a place we don't need to go.
I'm going to speak to your last question first. The person in the bank, I don't know. What went through my mind after the fact was she a member or a family of one of the victims? That's what went through my head. I think that I'm going to use a kind of a generic word here, the flavor of our society now, and for the last 20 years particularly, there hasn't been a lot of love or thinking about the ripple effect. And because the ripple effect from our family down to the furthest friend that we had at that time, it affected everybody in between. It affected my work. It affected my husband's work. It affected my daughter's work. It affected, and it went down the line from that. So the ripple effect affects everyone without them even knowing it. You know, and talking about the poison. And I hear people say, well, I wish they would start the killing machine again. You think that makes me feel happy? That's a ripple effect, that when they think of it that way. It just expands on and on and on. You make new friends. Like I have actually left Fresno area. I live in very Northern California area. And I'm very cautious to whom I let get close to me. And then when I let them get close to me, thank God I haven't had anybody turn on me yet, but they are affected from our experience. And so it ripples on and on. It's continuous. It's just like throwing a pebble into the water. The little waves just keep going out and out and out and out and out and out till you hit the bank, and sometimes it doesn't stop there. I hope I answered that. Thank you.
Indeed, it's this brutalization that I keep pondering about, and how it is that we stop it, how it is that we allow it, we rather than allowing it to continue, how it is that we end it. And the only way I can think of is to say, killing is not acceptable.
Exactly.
Not acceptable. Joe, speaking of killing, I read recently an interview with three men who were, two of whom had been executioners and one was their supervisor. And one of them was going through the tortures of the damned, just personally living in pain, had forsworn the system. But he said that he felt, as a result of what he had done, that he had been condemned by God. How do you, as a minister, deal with people who are in such pain?
Well, I think this is the story of someone who's suffering from acute trauma. And when someone is suffering from that kind of hurt, what they need more than anyone is someone they can sit with and help them through it. Preferably a trauma therapist who's trained in it. Because if you carry that around with you, it'll eat you up. It will literally kill you. And so when I hear that, I mean, I reflect on my own dreams of being executed and my own dreams, just horrific PTS dreams I've had, especially over the last 2 years. And if you don't have some help in dealing with this, you'll take that sense of condemnation to your grave. And no one should do that. That person was caught in a process that is evil. He's not evil. The process is evil. And he needs help understanding that. And that's I think our job is to convey the reality of this evil to everyone in society so that they can see what is going on in their names. This is not something that fell down from the moon. This is a law that has been passed in their names by a legislature and upheld by courts of people who supposedly represent them. So we have to educate them about the trauma involved and try to hopefully help the people who've been hurt by that trauma. And let's get away from this evil to a more humane system.
Amen. The idea of this brutalization fascinates me because it is so visible. It's visible on all sides. I read an interview with a prison guard who said, it's a woman, and she said she doesn't know anyone in her corps of prison guards who does not have PTSD. They're put in a position of lordship over those people that they put in cages and order around and refer to by numbers. I think the cost to everyone associated with this system on whatever level is beyond something that we as a society have yet been willing to deal with.
But if I may, I think you're a little too generous because there are political players in this system who don't give a damn. They don't care about the cost of the guards or the warden or to you or to me or anybody. They want to get elected. And that's all it's about. That's all it's about. Just attaining and creating, maintaining power. And if you have to kill people to do that, that's what you do. We have a governor here now who's a big Christian, and he's executed more people than any other governor we've had. And he's going to keep doing it. We've got 2 more executions set already for next year. And when people like that are engaged in this process, it's like you have to speak up and be counted. It's like Elie Wiesel said. He said, neutrality always favors the oppressor over the oppressed. You can't be neutral about this. You have to stand up and oppose these people. You have to be clear about it because they're going to keep on doing it. They are going to keep on killing people because it's their future, their political future. And it's very cold. It's very calculating. I've talked to these governors over the years. I know exactly where they're coming from. I've heard all sorts of platitudes. I've heard statements after executions about it's the will of the invisible one, as David Treen said, the governor of Louisiana, or it's the will of God, or whatever. And it's not. It's their will to kill people to maintain power. And it's just that ugly and it's that evil, and we just have to be honest about it.
Fair enough. Maddie, we've come to a point where I think the audience, the viewers out there, participants might want to let us know if they've been prompted to come up with some questions.
Yeah, there are a few questions. One of them, the first, I guess, is how can each of you, help someone who supports public murder or the death penalty change their mind?
Well, I think it's simple, to be quite honest. If you imagine state killing as a pie, any way you slice that pie, you cannot find a slice of that pie that is a rational justification for doing it. It's incredibly costly. You kill the innocent. The people who are prosecuted and convicted are poor. It's racially discriminatory, etc. We can go down the line. The only thing you can say that's an honest response for this act of public murder is revenge. So when I had my meeting with other folks with Governor Bob Graham in Tallahassee, Florida, in March of 1979 to discuss the death penalty, about what they were going to do. He had the largest death row in the country. And Roger Shin, my professor at Union Theological Seminary, was in that meeting with me. Dr. Shin asked Governor Graham, would you use the death penalty as an instrument of revenge? And he said no. But he was lying, because that's the only legitimate reason you can have for using the death penalty. There is not another rational justification for it.
I'd like to just say that I know I've converted 2 people with this one, and it's a far-fetched one, but I asked them, do they know who is actually killing that person on the night of an execution? And they look at me and they go, well, the warden. And I go, no, it's you. If you look at the paperwork, it says we, the people of the state of California, are executing John Doe. And then when you look at the death certificate, it says homicide. So I say to them, you have just committed murder. And their eyes get big and they just like, huh. I know 2 people that I've converted that way. And that's kind of a harsh way of doing it, but that's the truth.
Good for you.
And then I talk about my lived experience. I know you all don't know this, but I'm the granddaughter of a woman whose daughter was murdered in 1962 in Mississippi. And she was 25 years old. She was murdered by a husband. And at that time in Mississippi, it was a black on black crime. So, back then, the death penalty was unheard of. But because my family was respected by the whites in Mississippi, they decided that he should get the death penalty. And my grandmother was subpoenaed for the trial. And she was asked whether he should be given life or whether he should be murdered. And my grandmother said, what good would it do? That's not going to bring her back. Let him live. And so I tell them that is my story when I talk to people. My grandmother, who lost her daughter, she had grace and mercy for someone who had killed her daughter. And if she can do that, so can I.
Well said.
Donna has her hand up, I think. Mike.
No, I'm sorry. I'm having some technical problems. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. There's another question which is along the same line, and maybe I'll just read the last couple because I think we only have a little bit of time left.
Yep.
So one of them is, in my view, it appears that, and it's in keeping with these comments, I think, in my view, it appears that we long ago transitioned from a justice to a vengeance system. Do you foresee a way back for our fellow citizens is one question. And another, well, many have just come in. I wonder if the panelists could say a few words about the many successes of groups like DPF, thank you, in giving hope to those who are so tragically dehumanized.
So let me address the justice question, because that is asked under the assumption that there has been justice somewhere in this criminal system that we have. It's a criminal legal system. It's not a criminal justice system. It's been in existence from the get-go. The first law passed in Virginia regarding slavery in the 1660s focused on this and focused on killing Black people. So there is no justice, nor has there ever been any justice in the system. It is not about that. It is all about revenge and racism and discrimination on the basis of class. So we can just drop any discussion of justice because there's none involved.
With that, from the Reverend Joe Ingle, I want to thank everybody for having participated. The three of you panelists have given much more than I could have asked, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. And for those of you who've been out there listening, Death Penalty Focus is here. We're doing what we can to see to it that this horrific practice stops. And with it, it will change our lives, I believe.
But it's going to take more than Death Penalty Focus. It's going to take all of us. And so we need you, the people who are listening, we need you to get involved also. As John Lewis say, we need you to get in good trouble.
Good trouble.
So stand with us and stand with Death Penalty Focus.
Thank you, Luanda. Thank you, Donna, and thank you, Joe, and thank you, Maddie. Thank you all for being part of this hour. I've learned a lot.
I'll add my thanks and just remind people that we'll send you a note with some resources that I know Donna hoped we would share with you about some work that she does, and also a way of getting back in touch with us. There are a number of great comments and questions, which we didn't get to today, which we will answer the questions if we can after the session, probably tomorrow, and we'll share your comments with the panelists so that they see the comments they may not have had a chance to look at today.
Maddie, I realize I may have jumped the gun here. We have a couple more minutes, do we not, that we could try to
think we have a few more minutes. Yeah, we do, Mike. Let me see what I can. I think there's a comment, sorry, from one of the viewers. The victims' families are also victimized when they are preyed upon by the prosecution and many people in society to seek justice. There is no justice for murder by murdering someone else, and no healing. And that is brought to you by somebody who has personal experience.
I would agree.
Amen.
I think the other, and Joe, I don't know, you may have more to say, but just on a question about the impact of participating in executions on wardens and staff.
Well, it's devastating. And of course, each reaction is individualized. And the last execution, which I stood death watch, was with Ed Zagorski. And we did 2 death watches in 18 days. I don't know what I was thinking, but we did that. And so when we got to the end of that death watch and I left him for the last time, I walked out and met the warden with his retinue of people. And Ed had asked several specific things that he wanted done for the victims' families. He didn't kill them, but he knew some things that could, he thought, help them. And so I had interrupted my death watch with him to get messages to the warden, to get to the TBI, Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, to get to the prosecutor, to get him to prison to talk to Ed so he could share this stuff with him. So I met him there and I asked him if he got my messages, and he said he had, and he had acted upon them. And so here I am standing really face to face with the guy who's about to kill my friend. And I realized I've done everything I can possibly do for Ed. And the warden had done what Ed wanted to do. So I shook his hand and I thanked him for doing that. And I looked him in the eye. And Tony Mays did not want to be there any more than I did. He did not want to be there. He did not want to be doing that. And my old friend Charlotte Holman, who I hired into this business originally back in the 1970s, would have cussed me out for shaking his hand. But the reality is, that's the corrosive nature of this whole process. Everybody is eaten alive by it. And that includes the wardens, the guards, people like me, all of us who are in this process. We're completely and totally contaminated.
Well said, Joe. I can say that I haven't been on a death watch or vigil because, death penalty action, they had a couple virtual, and you could go online. I cannot. I just don't have it in me from everything that I've been through, that I've seen, to do that. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to know that people are being killed. So I have a folder, and what I do is those emails just automatically go into the folder, and I never look at them, because those are real people. That's that person who was a baby. That's that person who was a kindergartner, an 8th grader, a high schooler. That's that person who had parents, siblings, maybe even kids. And I just don't have it in me, because I can see the humanity in that person, and I just absolutely can't deal with that.
And it's also because you and Donna and I are traumatized.
Yes.
Well, and you've shared with us, and I hope it's been helpful to you, that you've shared some of the trauma that you've experienced in a way that has been beneficial to you, as it has been to us. I think those of us who care about our society, care about our world, who want this awful process to end, and who believe that with enough energy, enough work being done by good people to lift the burden from those who believe that they have no choice but to continue this process, and tell them that they in fact have a choice, and that choice is the up rather than the down. It's the positive rather than the negative. It's the yes rather than the no. And when we, as caring people, stand up and let it be known that this is simply not acceptable to us, there are those out there who hear us. And the more those people hear us, the more energy there is toward the end of this this practice. I remember when I first got started here, Joe, thanks to you, the polls showed 85 to 95% of the people in this country supporting the death penalty. Now it's down, in some instances below 50%, in some instances right around 50%. But at the same time, there were, out of the 90 nations in the world at that time, or let's say the 90 nations in the world, 60 of them were killing countries, and 30 were not. today it's just the reverse. It's better than the reverse. It's 60 that don't kill and only a few who do. And the United States, sadly, continues to be one of them. But I think with organizations like DPF and Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch and the people that do the walk with the Journey of Hope and the Murder Victims' Families for Reconciliation, all of these organizations, the Eighth Amendment Project, and so many that have stood up with us, simply standing up and saying, no, this is not acceptable to us. And the cowards that continue to hide behind the rules and hide behind the laws and hide behind the practices that have been acceptable for so long are not our leaders. And we are our leaders, and we have a choice to make. And we choose abolition, abolish the death penalty, and take a deep breath and let the people who have suffered so as a result of having this find ways to heal themselves.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. Thanks to all of you. And we're going to sign off now and wish you the best.